In the early days of the Pacific Theater during World War II, the air was thick with tension and the sound of engines roaring. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japanese forces quickly expanded their reach across the Pacific, capturing multiple territories and establishing air superiority. They seemed unstoppable, with experienced pilots and well-coordinated tactics. American pilots were thrust into a challenging situation. They found themselves outnumbered and often outmatched by the Japanese forces. Early confrontations revealed the skill of the enemy pilots, who flew advanced aircraft like the Mitsubishi A-6M0. These planes were agile and had a reputation for their speed and combat capabilities, allowing them to dominate the skies. Despite the odds, American pilots did not back down. Many were young, filled with a sense of duty and a desire to protect their country. They learned quickly through experience, often in harrowing dogfights where survival depended on quick thinking and sharp reflexes. The battles were intense and unforgiving, with pilots losing friends and comrades in the air. One of the most significant early engagements was the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942. This battle marked a pivotal moment for the United States. In this clash, American and Japanese forces battled to control the sea lanes. Though it ended in a tactical draw, it was the first time in the Pacific that a Japanese invasion force had been turned back. For many American pilots, this was a morale boost, a sign that they could compete against the seemingly unassailable Japanese forces. The American strategy began to adapt. The pilots were trained not only in combat, but also in tactics to leverage their strengths. They started flying planes like the F-4F Wildcat, which, while not as fast as the Zero, had its own advantages. The resilience and determination of the American pilots during this time were remarkable. They developed a spirit of camaraderie that helped them face the challenges ahead. As the war in the Pacific progressed, these pilots continued to refine their skills. The aerial battles became fierce, filled with moments of bravery and sacrifice. Each skirmish added to their experience, and slowly, American pilots began to reclaim control of the skies. The battles weren't just about planes, they were about lives. Each pilot understood the weight of their mission, many flying in honor of their fallen comrades. This period in the Pacific Theater set the stage for future engagements, displaying both the tenacity of the American spirit and the ongoing struggle against the formidable Japanese forces. One pilot, flying a P-40 Warhawk, faced a terrifying moment that would test his skills and courage. On that fateful day, he received word of a large formation of 64 Japanese aircraft heading towards his position. It was a daunting task, and the odds felt overwhelmingly against him. As he climbed into his aircraft, he felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The P-40 was known for its ruggedness, but against such a large enemy force, he knew he had to rely on his training and instincts. Taking a deep breath, he checked his equipment and prepared for what lay ahead. Once airborne, the pilot spotted the enemy aircraft in the distance, a dark mass against the blue sky. His heart raced as he engaged the radio, relaying their position back to his squadron. He knew he wasn't alone. Friendly pilots would join him soon, but the thought of facing all those planes by himself was daunting. As they closed the distance, he mentally went through his attack plan. He had learned in training that the key was to stay calm and keep focused. This was more than just a mission. It was a chance to protect his comrades and safeguard his country. When the enemy formation came into range, chaos erupted. The pilot initiated the attack, diving toward the group of Japanese planes. They began firing at each other, the sky alight with gunfire and the sound of engines roaring. He maneuvered his Warhawk skillfully, quickly dodging incoming bullets while aiming carefully at the enemy. In the heat of battle, he spotted a Japanese Zero coming right at him. Instinctively, he pulled back on the controls, dipping his plane sharply to evade the enemy fire. His heart pounded fiercely as he turned and repositioned himself to strike. With a steady hand, he pulled the trigger and his bullet struck their target. He saw one Zero spiral down, trailing smoke, a victory in the chaos of aerial combat, but he knew there were still many more planes to confront. The battle seemed endless. He fought bravely, alongside his fellow pilots who joined the fray, providing support and covering each other's backs. Each moment felt like an eternity, but they relied on their training, instinctively communicating through gestures and formations, working as a team to take down as many enemy aircraft as they could. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tide began to turn. The remaining Japanese planes, realizing they were outmatched by the fierce American resistance, began to break away and retreat. The pilot felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. Against overwhelming odds, they had stood firm and fought back. As the dust settled, he looked around at his fellow pilots, checking to make sure everyone had made it through. There were smiles and gestures of relief. They had faced death together and emerged victorious. On that day, amidst the chaos and danger, bonds were forged that would last a lifetime. As the lone P-40 pilot approached the swarm of enemy planes, his heart pounded in his chest. He knew he was outnumbered, but he focused on what he had trained for. Relying on his instincts and the countless hours of practice, he steeled himself for the fight ahead. With determination, he initiated the attack. He dove toward the first group of enemy fighters, skillfully maneuvering his aircraft. The P-40 was sturdy, built to withstand rough handling, and he pushed it to its limits as he weaved in and out of the formation. The air was tense, filled with sharp sounds, gunfire ringing out and engines roaring. As he targeted one enemy fighter, he could see the pilot inside, just as focused and determined as he was. Pulling the trigger, he felt a rush of adrenaline as his bullets struck true, sending the enemy planes spiraling down. But there was no time to celebrate. More Japanese fighters were closing in, and he had to keep moving. Using every bit of training he had, he executed tight turns and quick climbs, dodging incoming fire. Each maneuver felt like a dance, a test of reflexes and quick thinking. He spotted another enemy plane on his tail. Without a moment to lose, he abruptly dropped altitude, skimming the ocean below. The chasing plane overshot him, its pilot momentarily thrown off balance. Seizing the opportunity, he leveled out and turned back, aligning his sights on the enemy's vulnerable side. Another burst of fire, and the aircraft erupted in flames, another victory in a sky dotted with chaos. Around him, the aerial battle unfolded like a storm. He could see fellow American pilots joining the fray, each one engaging their own targets, but he knew he couldn't rely solely on them. Every moment mattered, and he had to trust himself. With grit and determination, he continued to engage multiple enemy fighters, never forgetting his training. He communicated with his squadron using simple gestures and quick radio calls, ensuring they were aware of each other's positions and movements. They were fighting as a unit, supporting each other despite the fierce enemy onslaught. As the battle dragged on, exhaustion began to creep in, but he pushed through. Every victory fueled his resolve. He was fighting not only for himself, but for his fellow pilots and their families back home. With each enemy plane he brought down, he felt a mix of relief and pride. Finally, after intense combat and what felt like hours in the sky, the tide began to turn. The remaining Japanese fighters, realizing they were outmatched, started to retreat. The pilot let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. They had stood strong against overwhelming odds, proving that courage, skill, and teamwork could make all the difference in a desperate situation. The aerial dogfight unfolded with intense bravado as the pilot executed daring maneuvers, determined to outsmart the numerically superior Japanese forces. He knew he was up against a formidable enemy, but his training kicked in, and he focused on using every skill he had. With the enemy planes swirling around him, he made quick decisions, diving and climbing in a series of sharp turns. His heart raced as he pulled the controls, feeling the G-forces pushing him into his seat. Each twist and turn required every ounce of his concentration. He kept his eyes darting, scanning for threats and opportunities alike. As he darted left to avoid enemy fire, he spotted an opening. One of the Japanese fighters had broken off from the formation, and he seized the moment. With a steady hand, he leveled off, brought his sights in line, and fired. The enemy plane exploded in a fiery burst, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. It was a reminder that he could stand his ground, but he knew the fight was far from over. More enemy planes were closing in, and he had to keep moving. His P-40 growled as he pushed the throttle, shooting forward. He slipped through gaps in the formation, just narrowly avoiding enemy bullets, some of which whizzed past him with alarming speed. He was acutely aware that each moment could mean life or death. With newfound confidence, he engaged another enemy fighter. This one was zipping around, trying to shake him off its tail. He mimicked its movements, anticipating the pilot's next move. As the enemy plane turned sharply, he followed, locking onto it. With a squeeze of the trigger, he sent a hail of bullets, striking true. Another victory. The determination inside him grew stronger. It wasn't just about survival. Every enemy plane he took down pushed them one step closer to gaining control of the skies. He could see some of his fellow pilots joining the action, supporting him as they fought back against the tide of enemy aircraft. The battle raged on, and with each successful hit, his confidence soared. He carefully wove through the chaos, constantly reassessing his surroundings. In this game of cat and mouse, he was learning more with each passing moment, adapting and countering the tactics of the enemy. As he took down another plane, the tide began to shift. The Japanese formation, once imposing, started to falter. He could see enemy pilots glancing nervously at one another, beginning to realize they were not invincible. The American spirit was alive, and they were fighting back with everything they had. Finally, after relentless combat, they managed to force the enemy into retreat. The pilot let out a deep breath, relief washing over him like a cool breeze. This aerial battle, filled with danger and bravery, had turned in their favor. Thanks to his determination and tactical prowess, the tide had indeed shifted, proving that courage could overcome even the greatest odds. Despite sustaining damage and facing overwhelming firepower, the pilot refused to back down. His P-40 had taken hits, smoke trailing from one of the wings, but he was fueled by a fierce determination to keep fighting. Every time an enemy plane swooped in, he tightened his grip on the controls, focusing on the mission at hand. As he faced the onslaught, he was acutely aware of the stakes. He knew that retreat wasn't an option, not when his comrades were counting on him. Each time he dodged a barrage of bullets, he felt a surge of resolve. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. Instead, he pushed forward, engaging enemy fighters with renewed vigor. From a distance, his fellow American pilots watched in awe. They saw the lone fighter standing strong against a swarm of enemy planes, outmaneuvering them with grit and audacity. His courage inspired confidence among them, motivating them to join the fray, knowing that if he could press on despite the danger, so could they. With each encounter, he showcased his skill, deftly avoiding fire and returning it with precision. His daring maneuvers seemed almost reckless, yet they were calculated. He knew the risks, but he believed in the cause they were fighting for. His bravery became contagious. It wasn't just his dogfighting skills that inspired his allies, but his sheer will to fight. As the battle raged, the support from his fellow pilots grew stronger. They rallied behind him, buoyed by his example. The pilot led the charge, taking the fight to the enemy while covering his friends' backs. They moved in formations, backing each other up. His willingness to stand firm in the face of adversity allowed them to gain ground. Despite the damage to his plane, he continued to engage the enemy. Each successful evasion seemed to further ignite the spirit of his comrades. They began to rally, picking off enemy aircraft one by one, proving that they could stand firm against the odds. The pilot's audacity not only kept him alive, but also transformed the battlefield. It wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for victory for each other. As they took down more enemy planes, the tide began to favor them. The Japanese forces started to lose their coordination, realizing their plans were falling apart. In that moment, the pilot felt a sense of camaraderie with his squadron. They were all in this together, fighting not just for their own lives, but for each other's safety as well. His decision to take on the enemy head-on had turned the battle into a symbol of resilience, proving that even when faced with overwhelming odds, bravery and teamwork could lead to triumph. After a grueling encounter in the skies, the lone pilot finally managed to return home. As he landed, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and relief. His aircraft bore the scars of battle, bullet holes and singed metal, but he felt a sense of pride swelling within him. The moment he stepped out of the cockpit, he was met with cheers from his fellow pilots and ground crew. They rushed to him, clapping him on the back and shouting words of admiration. He had faced impossible odds and lived to tell the tale, a true testament to his bravery. The adrenaline may have faded, but the feeling of camaraderie and respect was palpable. News of his incredible feat quickly spread, and he was hailed a hero. People spoke of how he had taken on a swarm of enemy planes, never backing down, and how his audacious maneuvers had turned the tide of battle. His courage inspired those around him, not just in that moment, but for days and weeks to come. His actions resonated deeply with the American forces in the Pacific. The pilot became a powerful symbol of resilience, showing them that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, hope and bravery could shine through. He was a reminder that each pilot's contribution mattered, encouraging many to dig deep and fight back against the enemy. Back at the base, he took a moment to reflect on the battle. He remembered the faces of his fellow pilots, the friends he fought alongside, and how their shared determination had made a difference. He understood now that their strength wasn't just in individual bravery, but in their unity as a team. Days later, he stood before his squadron, sharing his experiences and reminding them of the importance of courage in every flight. The bonds they formed during the fight were unbreakable, and he urged them to continue pushing forward, no matter the odds. Each mission was vital, and they had proven that together, they could overcome anything. His story became part of the larger narrative of the war. Newspapers picked it up, and he found himself receiving letters from grateful citizens back home. They expressed their admiration and thanked him for his sacrifices. It felt surreal, but he never lost sight of the fact that he was just one part of a much bigger fight. As he looked to the future, the pilot knew there would be more battles ahead. But he was ready. Armed with the knowledge that courage and teamwork could turn the tide, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight for freedom continued, and he would be there to face it, standing strong alongside his comrades.